What is up, fellow Star Wars fans? Welcome to a brand new Book of, I was about to say Boba, but Mandalorian breakdown, because this really, jokes aside, did just feel like a Mandalorian episode, and I can't lie to you, I really can't lie, and maybe this is my bias for The Mandalorian, which is my more preferred show, at least so far, 5 chapters into the Book of Boba Fett, because, we've had 4 episodes. I feel like I can gauge the show so far. We've only really, 2 episodes left for them to show their explosive chops towards the, end of the first season, at least for now, right? And what I'm getting to is that this was my favorite episode. Now, I have been enjoying the Book of Boba Fett. I'm not trying to put it down there. I'm just saying, leaving Tatooine felt like a bit of a breath of fresh air, so to speak, with all the other bits and bobs that we were seeing with Din Djarin's adventure this episode. Did you enjoy this episode more than the other ones? Come on, tell me, because I kind of did. And I am looking forward to Mando going to Fennec Shand and Boba in the next couple of episodes, or however long that actually lasts. But man, this felt like, oh man, I'm looking forward to The Mandalorian Season 3, basically. That's what I was thinking the whole time. So this episode picked up with that first intro scene. It was great. Mando, we really are picking up where we left off at the end of Season 2, where he said goodbye to Grogu. He was on a bounty mission with a tracking fob. I love it as well when we just saw him. Look at him. He is kitted from head to toe in Beskar spear, Darksaber. It's like Jesus. It's like it's almost like you're playing an MMO game and you're maxed out level 75, 65 with all your elite gear on. It's just like you're dripping. And there were so many little things I appreciated in this episode from the lore perspective, since we did bump into the armorer a little bit later, but even just the attention to detail, since when this fight unfolded between Mando, and let me just say, I like the callback to Season 1, where he's just like, I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. What I mean by the attention to detail is that Din Djarin is effectively fighting with a lightsaber here. That's what the Darksaber is at the end of the day, forged with a Beskar hilt, which is awesome to know, a quality of Beskar he's never seen before, forged 1,000 years ago. But regardless, when he's fighting, it was really awesome to see. I was just like, there's the Prince of Mandalore, the king, if you will. But then he was a bit of a noob and even burnt his own leg with the Darksaber. It's kind of like, if you're not trained how to use the lightsaber, that's what they say. Effectively, it's a Jedi's tool. Yes, surely anyone can use a lightsaber, that is true, but you will not be technically effective with it, and you can be prone to little newbie accidents like this, where you literally burn your own freaking leg, which really impaired him after this, as he was limping from there on out. And after all, it was created by a man who was a Mandalorian, but also a Jedi, so whoever really wields it after that should really have a little bit of training similar to that of a Jedi, in a sense, to help master the blade, their connection to the blade, and that is exactly kind of what we saw from the armorer. And I want to know more about this armorer, by the way. I'm going to try not to get too ahead of myself, but she knows a lot about a lot. So what is her story? I mean, I guess she just comes from a time where she remembers a lot of the Galactic Republic era, so that's how she kind of carries a lot of the lore and legacy of the Mandalorians that came before her, plus knowledge of the time period of when the Jedi were in their heightened kind of state. They were all around, even though it seems that nobody bloody remembers what happened 30 years ago, where there was loads of Jedi, but that's another thing. But hey, any Halo fans out there? Yes, I am gonna make that joke. How could I not make that joke? Din Djarin basically goes to a Halo ring. I mean, I love it, just seeing some kind of space station, which is effectively a Halo ring from the Halo series. If you're not familiar with the Halo games, just look it up and you'll see exactly what I mean. It's the exact same concept. There's an atmosphere, there's land on a ring in space. This was really, really cool to see. And what most fascinated me about this is when he was obviously returning the bounty in exchange for some information on where to find his Children of the Watch Mandalorian tribe, if you will, where they're hanging out, because after the events of Season 1 and Season 2, they were scattered even more, and in fact, they showed that a lot of the Mandalorians died in their old base of operations, so really it's just the armorer and a couple of them left. And what I was most fascinated by, to get back to the main point, is how is he going to feel about this now after what Bo-Katan told him about how the Children of the Watch, the people he's been with this whole time, are effectively this religious zealot-like part of the Mandalorian people, and how even whether it's the Clone Wars, whatever you've seen Mandalorians in this whole time, a lot of people have been wondering, well, whenever we saw them on Mandalore before the night of the Great Purge, when Mandalore basically got glassed and completely ransacked and it destroyed their home planet, and that's what scattered them all throughout the galaxy, they weren't really wearing that. It seemed that most of Mandalore had somewhat, I guess, kind of deviated the religion to, hey, yeah, you can take off your helmet, but there were a few extremists, if you will, who have kept the pure Mandalorian creed, and that is, for example, not taking a helmet off, etc., etc., and that has even given the armorer the opinion that because she has kept the pure way, this is the way of the Mandalorians that has been going for thousands of years up until, I guess, recent Star Wars media, in where they do take their helmet off. That's allowed them to survive, and if anything, through the creed and the religion, the Mandalorian people kind of adapting new ways of just taking your helmet off, this, that, and the other. Oh, you shouldn't really accept the Darksaber the way Bo-Katan did without winning it in combat. The fact that they were letting things slide like that led to the destruction of their people ultimately. I was thinking there would be a bit more of like an addressing of, well, you guys keep your helmet on. I've met lots of people who are and view themselves still as Mandalorians, but they take their helmet off. Do we really have to? But they kind of, I wouldn't say skipped over it, because Mando did say, do you know Bo-Katan Kryze? And she did basically say that they view Bo-Katan as a cautionary tale to their own Mandalorians, and how she once laid claim to the rule of Mandalore based purely on blood and the sword that Din Djarin now possesses. It was gifted to her by Sabine, not won by Creed. And she goes on to say that Bo-Katan was, born of a mighty house, but they lost the sight of the way. So it's kind of like these inner Mandalorian politics. They view that these people on Mandalore, the recent Mandalorians we've seen in various Star Wars animations and media, lost the sight of the way, and that's why everything led to the way it did. But at the same time, as much as I understand what the armor is saying there, when we got the awesome flashback of the night of the Purge, and where the Empire kind of thought, hey, let's just kind of take out the Mandalorians, because if we can't wield them, we should just kind of get rid of that threat. They completely ransacked them. Well, I don't know if the Mandalorians could really stand up to the might of the Empire, whether they lost the way or not. It feels like the Empire in their fist at the time of when they did the Great Purge was so formidable that whether they kept the way of what the armorer follows or not, and went Bo-Katan's way, where you could take your helmet off, it looked like either way they were going to get destroyed. But the way the armorer views it is that all of this deviation basically led to the waste of the Mandalorians. And I do get it. These people are kind of the super religious Mandalorian type who believe, and technically are, following the original ways. So they really do believe in the prophecy that has kind of low-key happened. Think about it. She said that, however, if it is not won in combat and falls into the hands of the undeserving, it will be a curse unto the nation. Mandalore will be laid to waste, and its people scattered to the four winds. What happened? That literally happened. Under Bo-Katan winning, well, she didn't win it, she was gifted it, so it followed the prophecy. So they probably do feel like, if anything, they're so reaffirmed by the fact that this happened, so that they are further invigorated to follow the pure way of the Mandalorian people. I guess I just expected a bit more of a debate from Din Djarin after he learned that, hey, I can take my helmet off, hey, you guys are Mandalorians too, you still follow the way, but albeit a bit of a different one last season, that he would be maybe debating this a bit more. But he seemed to be just as obedient as he ever was in season 1 and 2, whenever we got scenes between Din Djarin and the armorer. I just expected maybe a little bit more questioning from him. This is also really interesting how it is just a new start for Mando, at least for now, until we get season 3, and who knows how Grogu is going to be involved in all of that, because the armorer acknowledges, so you have completed your quest, then you may join our covert now as we rebuild. This is the way, this is the way. I also like how we have Paz Vizsla, who's obviously a part of the heritage of the actual Darksaber itself, getting a little bit kind of envious of Mando's situation, like the fact that he won it, and technically he is the rightful ruler of Mandalore now, and the Mandalorian people, and he's thinking, that belongs to my clan, I should be the ruler, and that's why it gets to that duel. But also, I do feel like they're not really, even though they said all of this lore about the Darksaber, did anyone not kind of think, well, why isn't the armorer saying, well, technically, you're telling me you won it in combat, so you are technically the ruler of our people. That wasn't really acknowledged. There was a duel. They talked about how it was forged 1,000 years ago, what happened to the Mandalorian people with Bo-Katan and the cautionary tale, that if you lose the way, well, the prophecy comes true. But why weren't they talking about, well, Din, if what you're saying is true and you did win it in combat, you're technically the ruler of our people. Really, the armorer, with how religious she is and how much she follows the creed, should have just, I would have expected her to kind of kneel down to him in that moment. But they didn't really acknowledge what this meant for the title of Din Djarin, even within their own extremist zealot creed. If anything, they really should have been like, holy crap, you are the leader, with how much they follow the rules of the pure Mandalorian way. Now, the armorer doesn't like that he has a Beskar spear, because a Beskar spear is a weapon, and Beskar should only, the metal of the Mandalorians, be made into armor. So they think of, okay, look, you got that, you know, it was a gift from the Jedi, fair enough, but let's melt it down into something. This is where Mando requests that he makes something for a foundling. Which foundling? Grogu. He wants to check up on him, make sure he's safe and okay with Luke, which is awesome, because I thought, oh my god, are we going to see that this episode? But clearly we didn't, but it could be in the next episode. She was like, okay, so what do you want to make? And this is where she starts melting it down and forging something. And at the very end, we saw these little chains. And I'm telling you, I could be wrong with this, but the fact that we saw multiple chains which hook together, and the fact that it could be wrapped up in a little kind of, you know, towel, if you will, that resembled Grogu's head, by the way. I mean, there was definitely a deliberate imagery there when Mando was on the civilian transport ship and he was looking at these little ears, these little cloth ears stand out. That was a cool little detail. But what is within that is, I think they've genuinely made a little Frodo Baggins like mithril chainmail vest for Grogu. A little Lord of the Rings reference there. But yeah, I think to make sure Grogu is extra safe, he's made, this is so adorable, we're gonna see when he actually does meet up with Luke and Grogu, whether that's in the next episode, who knows what we really have ahead of us. I'm super excited about the possibilities of that. Whenever he gives this gift to Grogu, Grogu's now going to be in a little chainmail of Beskar. I did find it interesting that the armorist said when, you know, he's not in your care anymore, that in order to master the ways of the Force, Jedi must forgo all attachment, and Din's just like, well, that's the opposite of our creed. What? Well, I guess she is saying that accurately to what she knows of the Jedi back then, but technically that isn't true when it comes to Luke and training Grogu in modern day Jedi training, because Luke doesn't forgo all attachments. Like, he cares about his sister, he cares about Han, he loves them. In modern day Jedi training, Luke didn't really want to redo the old Jedi ways, like Master Yoda's way, even though I think he did try and do that in the comics. But either way, I guess it's accurate based on what the armorer knows, but technically, no. Like, Luke Skywalker will not say that in order to master the ways of the Force, Jedi must forgo all attachment to Grogu. I also find it interesting with regards to the lore of the Darksaber that there seems to be a bit of almost Force-like connection that you need to kind of have, even if you're not a Force user necessarily, or a Jedi, nor a Sith. You do still need to connect with the blade, because I really like the little training mini montage we got with Mando with the Darksaber. She's saying you're fighting against the blade. It gets heavier with each move, he says. You know, if you try and fight the Darksaber, you're too weak to fight against it. And she says that his body is strong, but his mind is distracted. I have to take that as a larger word on the fact that he's distracted and not focused because of not being with Grogu anymore. And then this is when the duel happened, because they were like, maybe the Darksaber belongs in someone else's hands. And maybe, and that's when Paz was like, well, it was forced by my ancestor, the founder of House Vizsla, and now belongs to me. He was waiting for that opportunity. But what I liked with this fight, and I like how Din kind of accepted this, he was like, fine, you know, if this is the case, I'll let it happen if it happens. And as we saw, Din Djarin did get the drop on Paz with a throat slice, well, if he was to go there, so that's why he won the duel and was still the rightful owner of the Darksaber. But what I like about this moment as well is, I thought it was almost getting a little bit sloppy towards the end. I was like, well, you did win, you've got the Darksaber, why are you being so sloppy? And this allowed Mando to get all of these little stabs and slices in to ultimately win. But I think what they were doing there is still having the Darksaber situation of what Din was struggling with, but put onto Paz Vizsla because he was trying to use the Darksaber, but it was getting heavy. You could see that the actor in the Mandalorian suit there was kind of carrying it around as if it was the One Ring and gets heavier. So just how the armorer said that Din Djarin was struggling and fighting against the blade, and that's why it was getting heavier with every swing. That's ultimately what lost Paz Vizsla the fight as well, because he was getting heavier and he wanted to use it to attack Din Djarin, but ultimately that was his downfall. And ultimately, that meant the Darksaber is still with frickin' Din Djarin, but this is when he was kicked out. Frickin' pure Mandalorians. So this is when the armor was like, okay, for some reason randomly asks, have you ever removed your helmet? And that's where Mando literally couldn't lie and says, maybe. And she's like, well, then you are Mandalorian no more. But again, this kind of begs the question as to why the armorer earlier didn't kind of acknowledge that he is the leader of her, even. I mean, if she's so pure-blooded, creeded with the way of the Mandalorians, she should have recognized him as leader in that conversation. Now, even though he did break that rule, and technically that does mean you are no longer a Mandalorian, well, if she would have actually acknowledged that he was the leader, technically maybe he could have changed the rule and said, well, I decree that you can take your helmet off now. How about that? I feel like there was a bit of skirting over these things, because if you really think that she acknowledged that, as I was kind of ranting about earlier, then maybe this could have not actually had the same outcome. He was like, I beg you for your forgiveness, how do I atone? She mentions that according to the creed, one may only be redeemed in the living waters beneath the mines of Mandalore. And he's like, but the mines have all been destroyed. So this sets up a seed for how Mando might be returning back there in season 3, maybe getting access to a mine, maybe blasting through it, I do not know, and will seek that atonement. But again, the larger weird thing to me is that he had a bit of an awakening in season 2 with Bo-Katan, with how, you know, you don't have to follow the extremist zealoty kind of way. Yet he really still is subscribing to that. And maybe there is a reason, because as I said, well, technically they were right about the prophecy. And maybe Bo-Katan's ways and the way the Mandalorians deviated did throw them off course and allowed the prophecy to become true. So how do you guys feel about how Mando is still so desperate to be accepted by the Children of the Watch? And that could very well be the case going forward, with him trying to seek atonement to get back in with them. Albeit he is the leader of them, since he won the blade again with not only Moff Gideon at first, but now Paz Vizsla. So, I don't know, it's a bit weird there, I think. Now, the main reason I spoke about that for most of this review is because I feel like the latter of this episode, with going to Mos Eisley, getting a N1 starfighter, Naboo starfighter, which was awesome, pimping it out to almost these Beskar-like colors to complement, I guess, the whole visual appearance of Din Djarin's armor. That was awesome, and it was really fun. We even got a BD droid shoved in there. All of you fans of Jedi Fallen Order and Cal Kestis and BD-1 should be familiar with the BD droid. They're just technically isn't a lot to talk about at the same time. I know not many, like not everyone really enjoys the droid lady, I forget her name, but I found it like fun and playful this episode. I enjoyed just the interactions between Din Djarin and her, just like, you know, how's it run? He was like, wizard, you know. It's just like a nice fun time in the latter of this episode as they were tinkering with it. How we now know, do we have confirmations that Jawa's a furry now? What? Because she's been with a Jawa before? I don't know, there's just a lot of fun Star Wars-iness all chucked into a little ball of fun there. I feel like this episode really encapsulated what The Mandalorian has done so well, in where the Book of Boba Fett overall has felt Star Wars, don't get me wrong. It's just, it feels like it hasn't quite always nailed it on the head in terms of the Star Wars feeling in the way the Mandalorian show has. And I think getting this other perspective this episode with several things going on, if you know what I mean, kind of reminded everyone of like, oh shit, like the Mandalorian does do this, and this, which is what made us feel so Star Wars, whereas Boba Fett has kind of been like a, you know, like, okay, this is fun, but it's been slowly kind of going. Do you know what I mean? It kind of has that vibe, even though it has been pretty entertaining. Either way, though, Fennec Shand found him at the end of the episode, wants to use him as muscle. Mando said, hey, you know what, I'll help Boba on the house since they're bros now because of last season. But he says, first, I've got to pay a visit to a little friend. Now, that is interesting, because does that mean in the next episode as well, we're going to get some moments in where Din Djarin goes off-world again from Mos Eisley to find Luke Skywalker and Grogu. Another thing is as well, when Luke Skywalker walked away at the end of last season, he didn't say to Din Djarin, by the way, this is where I'm going to be hanging out, this is where I'm training Grogu. So, like, how does he know where his little friend Grogu is? I know that may be nitpicky for some of you, but it's genuinely a valid question. Because he said, like, before I go to Boba, basically, I need to go give something to a little friend, the chainmail, the Beskar chainmail, right? But how does he know where he is? I mean, I guess they're going to get into that next episode. I just hope that it makes sense. And also, does this mean we're going to see another deep fate to Luke Skywalker? Does this also mean we're going to get a firm answer as to, like, what's going on in The Mandalorian Season 3? Because if they, for example, end this little catch-up with Grogu that Din Djarin's going to go to him for and give him the gift of the Beskar chainmail, if they end it in such a way where he's like, okay, bye, and it does seem like he's really going to continue his training, and that's going to take years and years, who knows how long, well then that would infer that in Mando Season 3, he will be without the child again. Yet lots of people don't purely believe that, because obviously the child, Grogu, in The Mandalorian has been such a beacon of, you know, whether you like it or not, it has got a lot of other quality to the show, but take away the child, I think that will be a massive L for some people. So I'm just really intrigued as to what they're going to do to leave it off on, or if they're going to leave it ambiguous to make some fans kind of hope still that we could have Grogu in the next season. Either way though, guys, a really fun episode, but it wasn't a Boba Fett episode. It was a Mandalorian episode. It was basically, if you want to think about it this way, it was the season premiere of, or basically a backdoor pilot into the season 3 premiere of The Mandalorian, season 3. Like, there's no other way to look at it because it carries on that journey. And literally the only link to Boba Fett was the last 30 seconds of this episode. So I really enjoyed it, but this was a Mandalorian season 2.5 to 3 episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. I really want to hear your theories as to where you think things can go next. Do you think I was wrong about the Beskar chainmail? Do you think it's something else? Can't wait to see everyone's responses. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Links are in the description and in the top pinned comment. It's up to you which one you click on. But I'm going to love you and leave you now, everyone. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And may the Force be with you always.